All right, we're going to pick up our work on exercise 34.1. If you guys remember last week, we had gotten a start and we had built at least the beginning parts of the application, which we have up on the screen here. And we just kind of got the basics in place. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to build the interface, and looking at what's in the book, to me, it seems like a border pane would make a lot of sense. So we're going to have the center area here where all the labels and the text boxes are going to go. We're going to have a top area that's going to hold the status field. So you see, like right now, it says record not found. That most of the time will be blank, but every once in a while, a message will pop up there. And then at the bottom, we'll have our navigation buttons, which we're going to put event handlers on to get some of the work done. So let's take this one piece at a time. I'm already kind of determining that a border pane makes a whole lot of sense to me. So let's just go ahead and build that in here. So I'm going to create a border pane. I'm going to call it pane, and we're going to create a new instance of border pane and empty parameters here, folks. All right, now that I have a name for my border pane, I better add that library. Let's do a control space. And here I'm going to change the name to pane.
Could I get you to zoom in a bit for me, if possible?
Sure thing.
Thanks.
Thank you for asking. How's that? Better, I hope?
Yeah, I can guess it now.
Well, I think you need to, Sam, you need to work on a bigger screen.
I know. I had a double screen before the move, but not.
Yeah, I know. You get spoiled, don't you? The other thing that I already kind of know in advance is now that I do have this pane, I'm going to be putting stuff in certain areas. So I'm going to put something in the top. I'm going to put something in the center. And then I'm going to put something in the bottom. And I know that I have not named these things yet. I get that. But I'm also not panicking about it. I just want to kind of have them in place. I want to kind of take care of the easy pieces first. So to me, probably the easiest thing to take care of is the thing that's going to go in the top thing, which is basically just going to be a status field. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create that status field, and I'm going to create it actually outside the start method, outside the main method. I'm going to make it global. And I'm doing that on purpose. And one of the reasons I'm doing that is it's easier for any of the methods in the application than to change anything inside of these things if they're global. I mean, yes, I could do it with parameter passing, but as I start to write events that go with the buttons, those are going to end up all being separate methods. So for me, it just makes it easiest to do them separately. So I'm going to begin by just creating a private variable here where I'm going to put in a label. You know, just it's one of those constructs that we have in our forms. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this prefix naming. So LBL indicates label. And then this is going to be for what we call our status fields. That's just going to hold messages that come from the rest of the program. Just kind of, let the user know if something worked or not, and also let us know at the same time. And yes, that has to be a capital L here. And yes, that does require a library. So let's add that in. All right. And then that label is going to go directly into that top border pane. Yeah, I could build a box around it or a construct, but I'm not going to do that. I just want to get it done. And from what I saw of what they had in the book, it didn't look like they did anything fancier than what I did. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do also on a global level is I'm going to systematically create all of those form components, kind of stepping through this in order. So ID, last name first, middle, address, city, state, telephone. We're going to build all these objects once again on the global level within my program. I'm going to do a little bit of it manually, and then I'm going to start doing a bunch of copy pasting, folks, just so we can get through it. So here goes the first one. The first one is the ID field. That is going to be a label, and I'm going to call it label LBL and then ID, and I'm doing it uppercase. And then I'm just going to create a new label, and then we can actually feed that text right away, so we can actually, whatever we want it to say, ID probably makes sense, is what we'll put inside there. Then we're going to make a text box to go with that, and actually technically it's a text field in this language, and we will name that text for the ID, and that will be a new text field. And yes, I'm aware of the fact that the library needs to be added. I'm just going to type it all in first and then do the adding. So this time I'm just going to do a hover to do it. And JavaFX scene control sounds right. So this process that we just did where we created these two is now going to repeat, right? So we're going to create one for last name, first name, middle initial, all the things on that form. So you can just go ahead and kind of get busy on your own and do those things. You don't have to wait for me to get there in order to accomplish it. And I'm going to basically copy and paste from a different document. But what you guys could do to accelerate workflow, for example, is you could copy those two lines, since the format's basically going to repeat, and then just change it. So like the first one here could be last name, just for example. And yeah, spelled correctly, of course. And then here in the label, the text that's going to appear on the form, we also say last name. But this time we put a space in it because our users are going to see it. Okay. And then, of course, this name here is going to have to change also. So we're just going to keep our naming consistent so we know how to find stuff, basically. But that's ID and last name. And then from there, I'm going to go ahead and add first name and middle initial. And here they are. And then I'm going to move on to the address. I'm going to throw in my city and state. And then finally, telephone and email. Right. Just going to check back at the book here real quick. Yeah, and I want you guys to notice that there is no email field. You guys catching that? That's an adjustment that I put in. I thought, hey, email thing might be kind of nice. Can we just go ahead and do that? And there is a little bit of a reason that I'm doing that, because here they show email. So why are they not putting it on the form? You see, so that's the why. The other thing that's kind of interesting here is it does point out the fact that the primary key is the ID field, and that the ID field therefore has to be unique. And if you guys know your database stuff, that's what primary key indicates. So now I've basically built all of these components in the middle, and now all those components in the middle need to go somewhere. And so that's going to be my next thing. So I'm going to go now into the start method, and I'm going to think about how I'm going to structure all that. And the way that I'm going to do it is kind of what we did before, which is I'm going to put together a V box, which is going to hold a series of H boxes. That's my working approach on this. And so let me go ahead then and create the V box first. And I'll do that. And actually, I guess it probably should come above the border pane now that I think about it. So let's put it above the border pane. And I will just declare one V box. And let's go ahead and instantiate one. And we will do a spacing of, and I'm going to go with 5 pixels this time. All right. And so we're just calling that V box. And then that V box is going to end up here in the middle. So I can already feed that in. And I did it all lowercase here, if you noticed. All right. And now the V box itself is going to hold basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows of information, or 5 H boxes, each with all the components that are involved. So you'll see the pattern here as we go. But as we build up those H boxes, there's no reason why we can't have the V box ready to receive them. So what I'm doing is the whole get children thing, and there's going to be multiple objects, so we're adding all, if you remember that technique. And I know that I don't have everything created yet, but I will be coming back here to add those things as I create them. And most likely, you know what, I'll probably just name them, you know, that I'm thinking about it, HBox1, HBox2, HBox3, HBox4, HBox5. How does that sound? And if I know that in advance, you know what, I can just drop that right in here and just get it over with. And so there's my first one. And now being hopefully somewhat intelligent, I'm going to do a little copy pasting here and paste them in 5 times and get rid of that last comma, and then just change the numbers. All right. So now let's go ahead and create all those H boxes. And we'll just do this systematically. We'll create the first one. Once we get the first one done, it's going to be a piece of cake. So we already have the names already decided, so no big deal. We're going to put 5 pixels of spacing in all our H boxes, by the way. All right, so there's the first one. And you know what? We created one. Let's add the library, and then let's start creating all the others by just copy pasting. And so I'm going to take this first one here, just highlight it. I'm going to create a space between all of these and then just renumber them all. And, you know, this is just one of these kind of routine, mundane kind of programming tasks where you just kind of get into a flow, and you can see, like, you can work pretty quickly if you kind of have a roadmap of where you're going. All of these, of course, are going to have very similar statements attached to them, by the way. So each one of these H boxes, as they are numbered, is also going to do a get children dot add all, and then we'll start adding the components one at a time here. So if we look at that first row, what ends up inside of here are going to be these 2 things. It's going to be the label ID and the text ID. And if you look here, this is our guide, right? So I'm just putting those 2 objects in the first H box. Next, I'm going to copy this statement again, trying to make this as efficient as possible. Change the number to HBox2. And now what will go in the second one? Well, that's going to be last name label, last name text box, first name label, first name text box, middle initial, et cetera, et cetera. And so that looks kind of like this. And yes, I am wrapping down to the next line. I'm going to be, once again, copying these. And you know what? I should, since this is going to be a repeating process, there's no reason not to just kind of paste it all in like this and then just tweak. So let's fix all of these. And then we'll fix all of these. All right, so the next one's going to be just the address label and field. So that'll be in this listing. After that, we'll have the city and the state. And then finally, phone and email on the last line. All right. And for the most part, believe it or not, our interface is close to complete, real close. You know, it might not be a bad idea to run it right now and take a look, but we still have this flagging as a problem because we haven't created whatever's going at the bottom. And what are we going to create for the bottom? Well, if you remember what we did last time, we created an H box and then put 4 buttons into it. That's the exact same thing I'm going to do. I'm going to actually put that below the V box because visually that's how it kind of comes up on the page. And so I'm just going to create another H box here. And this one we're going to call, let's call this one button box. I think that's what we called it last time too. Kind of makes sense. Once again, we'll put in 5 pixels of spacing here. All right. This also is going to need that whole like get children, thing. So let's just copy one of these, probably one of the short ones, and then we can just adjust it. And then what will go inside of here are the buttons. Now I haven't created the buttons yet. Oh, hey, we got to do that. All right, let's now just remember that we got to put buttons there. We're going to go back up to the global level again, and we're going to add our buttons up here at the top. Once again, I'm making them private so the programs can't interfere. We're calling upon the button class. Library is needed, control space. And then we need to start naming them. So if you look at the book, it's view, insert, update, and clear. So I'm going to do btn view. And here we can actually pass the parameter of what the button says. So we may as well. And then get our semicolon at the end. This will be a repeating process here, folks. So let's copy that whole line. Paste it 3 more times, and now we're just going to adjust the name and the text. So the second one was insert, update, and clear. Insert, update, clear, and clear. All right. Let's go ahead now and add these buttons one by one into our structure right here. So you can strategically just copy paste them in. And clear. All right. That should be our interface. And you know what? Once we get this name here, the button box placed into the bottom of the border pane, our interface should be complete. And my thinking is, let's go ahead and take a look and see if it looks okay, because if it doesn't, then we can still fix it. So I'm going to go ahead and save my work here, folks, and I'm going to hit the run button, and let's see what that interface looks like. And I'm getting exception error. All right, let's see if it's giving us anything useful here. I'm looking at all the line numbers. Looks at line number 14 looks like it's a problem. Let's see what that is. I don't know if that matters or not. I don't think so. My only error really is this one. Yeah, because yeah, right. That's right. I'm not using it, so that considers that an error. But it's not a red error; it's a yellow error. My launch directive is in place.
Now, did you mean to add all those buttons to HBox 1 on line 59?
Ah, thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent catch. And that actually should be called what? Button box.
Button box.
Yeah, thank you. Good catch. All right. I don't think that's what the problem is, but hey, you know what? Maybe it was. Yeah, it's not liking the start method. Recall the right thing. Primary stage, primary stage. Oh, do you see what it says right here? So I have some text here that's not resolving correctly. I thought I changed that. Yeah, so I'm going to review all my code here really quick, folks, and look for obvious mistakes. And like I said, the only thing I'm seeing is this, but we can just simply comment that out for now, and it shouldn't stop us from running. Although here's what can happen. If you are using SQL, it expects that you throw an exception, and it's doing it here. As
Does it
opposed
because
to
line 13 that field is blank?
this one here?
Yeah, does that have something to do with it?
Yeah, technically I don't need to have that in there at all. Let's save it one more time and try running it. Let's see if it throws an error this time. And I'm going to guess it's throwing it at the same spot. See, the strange thing is it's catching what I used to be calling this. If you guys remember, at first I had a thing in here that says name me because I didn't have a name for it last time. Remember, I just threw in a kind of a generic name, and for whatever reason, it seems to still have that locked in memory somewhere. And I'm trying to kind of overcome that. Do you see any?
Is it running the right program?
Yeah, that's always a thing too, right?
Yeah, I've run into that many times with the clips.
Yeah.
I've run into that problem with IntelliJ way too many times.
Yeah.
All right, let's try. And you see, here we go on the project level. You guys notice this? Yeah, and I think I already know what's going on here. All right, let's see if we can overcome this, though. I have faith. And you kind of have to walk into it that way.
I can figure out what's wrong. It's just a matter of when.
Is it one of the issues with the default package being the wrong one?
Yeah, that's not a far-fetched thought. We're not doing a package declaration on anything, though, so it should be okay. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to shut down Eclipse and restart it.
I've had to do that with like SQL Server Management Studio or whatever. I'll have new like variables and stuff in there, and it'll say it's not able to find them, and then I'll restart it and it'll work again.
Yeah, it's something it's loaded into memory is what's going on. That name me thing is loaded in memory, and it's not flushing it. And that's actually part of what we call Java garbage collection. Have you guys ever heard of that? Java is one of those. Yeah, Java is one of those languages that goes through and automatically does memory management. Where like if you were writing in like C or C++, you actually have to tell it to release memory. Different approach. And so without changing any of the code, it's okay. It's still coming up with the error. Let's see if it's the same error. Yeah. I see, and I'm not seeing that in my code. So now I'm doing like a goofy thing, right? Where is name me? String not found. And so how can it be stuck with that when it's just not there?
Do you think copy pasting it from the code from this file into a new file might work since it'd be starting fresh?
That is a goofy approach to use, frankly. But sometimes that's exactly what makes it work. It's goofy things like that. I'm looking at all my import statements here too at the top. And right now I'm doing a little bit of comparison between what I have in the past and what I have currently. And all of it's in there correctly.
Are you looking at the other code in another instance of Eclipse?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good question though, Cody. Right, because if you're running another instance of Eclipse, it could be conflicting. And there's no way they can conflict because one's on one machine and one's on the other.
Oh yeah, no.
And then Notepad++ and Eclipse is.
Oh yeah.
are the two things. All right.
And your launch arguments, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
you
I
know
don't
the other fun part of this is this is the easy part of the application.
Right. Well, let's copy and
So
paste it
is-
to a new one and try and see if Jay's suggestion works.
You know,
Plain text.
It's the only thing I could think of. If it's got like something stuck in memory and it's not getting rid of it, maybe starting on a fresh document might work.
yeah, that would be the thinking, but I'm now kind of very carefully looking at all the things
trying to
I
look-
have here.
I'm trying to look through it as well, like comparing it to mine, because mine loads. It just doesn't look nice.
Okay. Now I'm noticing I don't have any highlights in the margins now, none at all. You guys seeing that?
Mhm.
All right, so I'm going to try a different trick before I start like throwing the baby out with the bathwater kind of
Mhm.
thing. That's a really bad analogy, by the way. But I'm going to do this refactor.
Mhm.
And all I'm going to do is rename it, and let's call it exercise 34_1B. And
Well, and then we'll know for sure if it's running the wrong application somehow.
yeah,
Contains a main.
That looks perfectly fine to me.
yeah, it is fine.
Yep. Yep.
Especially since
That
I
is so
copy
weird.
pasted it from a different app, or it auto created it for me. All right, let's see if that helped. Okay, and that's not a trick I usually pull out in class, but hey, that's what. Okay, still giving me an error. All right,
Well, that's weird.
yeah, isn't that weird? All right, we're going to plan Z, not plan B. So we are just going to go ahead and create a new class file, and let's just call this a staff table. How about that? And I'm not going to put in any other things here because I am just going to basically replace everything, and then we'll just update the name. And actually, this should do it for us automatically. We'll save. Let's run. Still got errors. Wonderful.
What does that even mean?
His Eclipse is struggling. Is what that means.
Not
Yeah,
Eclipse.
I'm not sure what's going on. I'll be real frank. And why it's not working. But
So
I'm
it's more
noticing
like-
that it has that red mark there, and that
Right.
concerns me. So
Is anybody else's working?
Mine's working.
yeah, I
It looks
would
pretty
think
much
yours
the
is
same.
fine. Oh, okay. So we'll check it out. See, we have this connector file here, and it's not finding it. And so I'm gonna, and I know exactly
That's
why because I deleted it. So no wonder it's not running.
That would do it.
Well, it's strange because we weren't using it in the program, but Java actually cares about that kind of stuff, I guess.
Well, yeah, it's part of the same project structure. That's totally it.
Mhm.
And so now it'll probably work, right? And probably the original one would probably work too. Yeah, see?
Yay!
All right. It's not the prettiest thing, and that's obviously not a good size, right? And this obviously needs to be centered. So we have a little work to do, but okay. But basically the interface is pretty much done.
It's a start.
Yeah, it's close. It needs to be wider and it needs to be taller. So let's start with that. Let's start with the wide and tall. So let's go 500 and let's go, I don't know, 120. Saving and running. All right, closer. So what do we need? What do we make it? 200, folks? And it's kind of good to get the interface part of it out of the way. Okay, everything's on the screen. What I really need to do is just center those buttons It's not the prettiest thing, but I'm not really worried about that. We can always make it prettier later. But centering the buttons is a pretty darn easy thing to do. So let's go ahead and just do that. Then comes the fun stuff. As if this wasn't fun already. All right. Excuse me. This is going to require a library, of course. So we're going to pull in the JavaFX geometry library for positioning. So that's just centering the buttons. I'm pretty confident it's going to work, so I'm not even going to look. Now we need to do the other parts, the database things. And this is where the steps get a little bit more complicated. But once you get these steps down, the process really becomes kind of repetitive in the grand scheme of things. But it is pretty technical. What I am going to do to accelerate our workflow here, folks, is I am going to bring up my code share page because otherwise, if I'm waiting for you guys to catch up to me, we're going to be waiting all night, you know, that kind of thing. So that's not what I want to do. This is some work that our Java 1 class did last time, which I'm sorry, but that's all going away. Here is the link. I'm going to drop this into the chat window as soon as I can find the chat window. All right, so this is the code share page. And so as I write some of the SQL statements and more complicated methods, in essence, I'm going to be pasting them in. Now, the trickiest part for you is going to be getting it to talk to your database, and more importantly, to make sure everything is named correctly. All right, so step by step, our next logical step is, if you remember back to like our example problem that we did, we created SQL statements and then we put them into basically a variable structure that was named that we could call back. And I'm going to do the same thing here in my application. So I'm going back up to the top to the global level, and I'm creating a statement object, control space for the library, and it does come from the Java SQL libraries. And now that I'm looking at this, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, it's just regular Java SQL libraries, not the MySQL. All right. And I'm just going to call this one, I think last time I called it STMT or something like that. Let me just verify that. That's what I called it. Kind of abbreviating statement. And so that's going to be the object that holds our query statements as they send off to the server. All right. Next step is we need to initialize our database connection. So no matter what we do, if you remember back to this exercise, and this is why this is helpful to do first, all of these steps of loading the driver, connecting to the database, well, here's a statement class, but that we kind of already did, the result set and all that. But at least the pieces up here, those are things that we're going to repeat every time. So I'm going to actually write a method that connects to the database for us that we can just call through the application. And I'm going to borrow some of the stuff from here to build it. And so in our main application, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a spot, and I'm going to do it right below the scene in the stage. That's my kind of preferred place to do it. And I'm just going to call this initialize. In fact, I'm going to do this lowercase, initialize DB, so, or initialize database. And I'm putting it in there as a method call, right? Like I'm calling a method, but knowing that I haven't created it yet, because I'm kind of lazy to type the method stub. So I'm writing the name of the method, and then I'm going to hover and create the method and just let it do it automatically. See, and now I can just put in my code. Now, should it be private? Well, you know, you can have like a whole debate on that. I'm going to leave mine private. I'm going to leave mine void. I do not need to pass anything into it, because basically what it's going to do is try to connect to the database. Now, because it's doing a database connection, I either have to throw an exception handling onto the method name, or I'm going to use a different approach. And I know that maybe you guys didn't do this very much in Java 1, but we're certainly going to do it in Java 2, and that is we're going to put together what we call a try-catch statement. And if you remember any of this from Java 1, what a try-catch statement is, inside a try block is the code we're going to try, and hopefully it works. If it doesn't work, we're going to put in a catch, which will catch the exception and give us a message letting us know that we had a failure. So we're going to do the first part first. I'm going to write the catch block so it's ready to go, so I don't get errors here, and just put in another set of curly brackets. Right. First, let's try some code. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load in my driver. That looks like this. All right. And if you remember, the system out print line is not necessary. It's going to just write to our console here. The people who are using the GUI will never see it, but we will, right? So for us, it'll just tell us, hey, your driver loaded. That's good, right? The next thing we'll do is the same thing we did in the simple program, is we're going to copy in these two lines to form the connection. And in this case, you have to kind of complete this statement. But for me, it is going to be, and what did I name mine Java Book 2? Is that what we decided last time? It was Java Book 2?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, and you know what? If it's not, we'll find out the hard way. and see, I'm psychologically prepared for that. So, and that's, I'm hoping that you guys, if you pick up anything from these classes, right? Sometimes you can kind of anticipate when things are going to fail or be difficult. And it doesn't mean you have to give up along the way just because you know it's going to be hard, right? We just keep plowing forward. We will get this going. So, and then the next thing I'm going to do is put in my password, which yes is just password. Horrible.
However, it'll work eventually.
Yeah, horrible but true. All right. After that statement, I am going to put in another system out print line, because if it does connect to the database, I want to know, right? I'm also seeing that these are requiring libraries. Oh, I never uncommented, right, my SQL import. So if you have that commented, please remove. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm just getting rid of the comment marks. So now all the, oh, notice what it did though. Threw in another one up there. So I'm getting rid of that one. That one's redundant. So rather than put in a separate import for each Java SQL tool I need, I'm just pulling in the whole darn library, so it just works. All right. All right. So back down to Initialize DB. Loaded the driver, console message. Formed a connection, console message. Next thing that we do, if you remember, is we then feed a statement in. Okay, but that's going to be kind of a generic holder. And I'm actually going to make a little room here because I'm going to throw in an additional thing. And the way that the statement is going to work is we use the connection that we created with our name. See how it highlighted? And then we are using the create statement method to feed a statement into the database. Now, I left this line blank because the other thing that's kind of new for us is we are outputting stuff to the console for us to see, right? But isn't it nice that if the user also sees a message too? So we set up that label that holds the status, and we can let the user know. As soon as the application comes up, there'll be a little message that just appears. It says database connected, right? So you know you could, like, you're from the GUI that it's working. Isn't that useful, right? It absolutely is. Now, let's just say that they have a failure and the catch comes into place. So the database doesn't connect, you didn't turn on your VPN or whatever it is. Here you have to put in some sort of exception handler, and I'm just going to call mine X, whatever. It doesn't matter what it's called, right? And now the question you're going to ask yourself is, how are you going to handle an exception if it happens, meaning you're not connecting to the database? Well, there's not much functionally that we can do for the user if it doesn't connect. You know, maybe you should say a message like, hey, maybe you should connect to VPN, because this isn't going to work without your VPN. What I did last time, and it was kind of goofy, I suppose, but these are the messages I put in last time. So on the console, I said, something's wrong with the database, help, right? And then it throws in X. And you know what X is? This is the actual error number that's generated by either the database or the system trying to retrieve it. And it usually is in the form of a numeric code. It'll say error code 45. And then you can go to online and Google it, right, and figure out what it is. So it's useful sometimes to actually put the actual message that's coming back from the system into your console. So instead of seeing like a debugger telling you, hey, you have a null pointer exception, you can read it in the console instead of having the program tell you. The other thing that'll happen is in the status field, the user will see database connection failed, please try again, and maybe have you how about this? Database connection failed. Is your VPN active? That's really, pretty appropriate, and that might give them the idea, oh yeah, you better turn on VPN to run this. All right. So that's our initialize thing. And here's what I'm doing for you guys, right? This is where I'm saving you a little bit of typing. This is going in the code share. And so if you typed it, good for you. Otherwise, there it is. Now, the nice thing about having this little piece here, if you're always using the same database or always doing something with databases, and it's always on MySQL, you can just use this method anywhere. I'm just putting it out there. You could even write it as a separate class file and call it in by its class name. Interesting. That's an interesting thought, isn't it? But a simple method like this is typically what most programmers will do. And it works pretty well. Now, after you've highlighted something in the code share to copy it, if you guys could be as kind as to unhighlight, like click off of it so other people can see it better. That's the courtesy. Thank you. All right, so now we have the database initialization happening. That's an important piece. And you know what? I could run the program now to see, but I have the problem where it's not going to let me VPN through a remote client. And so I'm going to have to deal with that in the aftermath. So I might have to switch paradigms here pretty soon. But I want to press ahead and write a little bit more stuff before we do that. Most notably, get the event handlers in place for the buttons. Then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back. In the interim, I'll try to switch machines. All right, so here we go. Let's create the buttons now, or the event handlers more correctly for those buttons. And just to do it efficiently, I know I have 4 buttons. Each button will just simply use a Lambda event handler, and each one of them will point to the methods indicated. So I want you to notice that view, insert, clear, and update will each point to their own method after I've initialized the database connection. All right, so each one of these will then need to be created. So we need to create each one of these methods. Now, if you want, you can go ahead and just allow Eclipse to do it for you. And if you have similar tools in IntelliJ, if that's what you're using, or in NetBeans, all the good IDEs have tools like this. They recognize that. And what they don't understand, though, is what should actually go in here. Now, the reality is these are not going to be objects that we're passing in. And so where it says object, that's not correct. And wherever there's a return statement may or may not be correct. And I'm just kind of looking through my application here, and I will tell you that none of them will require a return. So all of them will be void. So wherever it says object, you can switch to void. So why don't you just go ahead and do that. And after you switch it to void, then also go in and remove the return statement and the comment. You don't need those. Just like so. Right. So now we have each one of the methods created. Right now they're not doing anything, but we were able to basically do this piece of it, right? And get the interface in place. So if you click on the button, it'll call in the method, even though the method's not doing anything yet, but we will be doing something with those methods. All right, this is a great time to take a 5-minute break. So we're going to take a break. And when we come back, I'm probably going to have to reinitiate the recording, and I might be working on a different computer, folks. So I might be switching machines here midstream. I did make somebody a co-host, so the session will stay active even if I drop out. But I will see you back at, let's say, let's call it 6:45. Give me a couple extra minutes to make sure I get all that rigmarole going. See you in about 5-6 minutes, folks.